Hi, my name is Valerie Leonard. I am a consultant based in Chicago, and I focus on community and organizational development. I want to thank NABJ today for allowing me to kick off your NABJ Chapter Day. Your focus is the Future Chapter Project, and you're encouraging members to connect to this idea cloud to make your chapters powerful, profitable, and productive. Along those lines, we're going to talk today about lasting impact, building powerful, productive, and profitable organizations. Now, note my P's are in a slightly different order than yours, but nevertheless, we will arrive at the same destination. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit of information about myself. I work with community-based organizations to improve their internal board management systems so that they can make a positive impact in the lives of their clients and surrounding communities. I teach online courses in operations management, program development, financial management, and proposal development for UIC's online certificate in nonprofit management program. And when I say UIC, I'm speaking of the University of Illinois at Chicago. I've also developed a 10-week workshop series focusing on nonprofit issues, and this includes subjects like startup, board development, finance, and compliance. And I recently started my own internet radio talk show, Nonprofit U, on blogtalkradio.com. On a personal level, I am very engaged in the community. I am leading a community development process in North Lawndale, and I am very focused on issues like our schools and the impact of budget cuts to low-income communities like North Lawndale. This webinar has basically three focuses, and we will, one, provide working definitions of powerful, productive, and profitable. And it's not that you don't know what these words mean, we just want to make sure we have a common definition for the purposes of this webinar. We want to also identify characteristics of powerful, productive, and profitable nonprofit organizations, and then provide strategies for organizations to get there and stay there. So let's start with powerful organizations. Our working definition of powerful is having the ability to control or influence people or things, hopefully for positive change, having a strong effect on someone or something, and having great prestige. And those definitions come from Merriam-Webster, and from where I'm sitting, it looks like NABJ fits all of those. So when we look at the characteristics of powerful organizations, we see that they have the capacity to fulfill their missions. They have influence with their clients, in their communities, with other organizations, with elected officials, and other stakeholders. They also have strong brands. They make great impact in the lives of their clients and communities, and most importantly, they affect change. So how do organizations get power? I would compare this to an oxygen mask analogy. You know how you get on the plane, and one of the first things the attendants say, they tell you, place the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping small children or others who may need your assistance. Well, it's the same way with organizations. In order to have a sustainable impact on clients and communities, organizations must go through their own self-reflection process and put systems in place in order to ensure their own survival. You can't very well help others until you're stabilized yourself. So when we talk about building organizational capacity, generally speaking, we're looking at capacity along 8 different areas. We always start with the leadership, and that includes your board and executives. And we want to look at things like their vision, their skills, and their capabilities in order to, make the vision come to fruition. We look at programs and their ability to affect change and how smoothly they run. We look at their management systems to make sure that they're providing sufficient support to the programs and services. We also look at the financial systems, making sure that the financial performance is on par and making sure that the systems are in place to continuously keep the organization going, make sure that there's a separation of duties, good financial controls and that kind of thing. We also look at fundraising capability, how engaged the board and staff are in the fundraising, and if the fundraising can actually support the programs. We look at the skill level of personnel, and that includes volunteers. And then we also look at your networking capacity. And when we speak of networking capacity, we're looking at basically your relationships with your stakeholders. This can include your clients, it can include your partners, it can include other community members, all of the people who have a vested interest in the work that you do, how well you can marshal those forces in order to move the organization forward as need be. Another thing that powerful organizations do is they solidify influence with key stakeholders. They strengthen their relationships with clients, local community, other organizations, elected officials, funders, and other stakeholders. Most importantly, they build trust. They follow through on commitments with excellence. Powerful organizations have strong brands. And when I talk about brand, I'm not necessarily talking about a logo. Your brand is so much more than a logo. Your brands embody the total experience that stakeholders have with the organization, and this includes things like, your website, your communications, the quality of your programs and services, and the ability to follow through on promises and claims. And according to Jerry McLaughlin, a famous marketer, brand is the perception people hold in their heads about you, a product, a service, an organization, a cause, or an idea. Brand building is the deliberate and skillful application of effort to create a desired perception in someone else's mind. So you see that building a brand is a very, you have to go about it with an intentionality. You're going to have a brand one way or another, and your brand is the totality of the experience that that people feel about you and the organization and your services. So you may as well craft it to be as much of a positive experience for people. So you want to be at the top of the mind with your clients. You want to have top of mind recognition with your funders, top of mind with the community, and when they think of you, let's hope that they think positive things. Powerful organizations positively impact the lives of the clients and communities they serve. And when we speak of impact, we're talking about the degree to which the lives and communities change as a result of the organization's programs, services, and advocacy. Impact should be measured, documented, and communicated regularly. And remember, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And then me being from Chicago, I always say you should do it the Chicago way: document and measure, communicate early and often. Powerful organizations affect sustainable change, and this is both internal and external. According to the University of Sydney and their Talent and Organizational Development Department, sustainable change may or may not be driven by external pressures to change. However, sustainable change requires a clear and shared vision, capacity for change, actionable first steps, leadership that models the way, reinforcement and evaluation, and continuous improvement. So when we look at this slide, we see what that looks like, see what that model looks like. Along the top, we see all the 7 steps that lead to successful change. On the right column, we see the outcomes of the steps that lead to successful change and what happens if any of those steps are missing. And then in red, we see various steps that are missing at different levels. And then again, to the right, we see the impact of those steps being missing. So as we can see, there's obviously pressure for change, clear shared vision, capacity for change, actionable first steps, leadership that models the way, reinforcement and solidifying change, evaluation and constant improvement, and all of those steps together lead to successful change. However, if the pressure for change is missing, we can still reach successful change because your most powerful organizations are actually going to be more proactive. They don't necessarily need external pressure in order to change. They may be more proactive and feel that they need to change some things internally as well as externally themselves. So that's okay. However, if the clear shared vision is missing, you're going to end up with the quick start that fizzles, because you might have 1 or 2 people who have bought into it, but the whole organization hasn't bought into it. So you're not going to get very far. If you don't have the capacity for change, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not intelligent. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have the skills. It could very well mean that you don't have the manpower, you don't have the money, but when those things are missing, that can lead to anxiety and frustration because you have motivated staff and leaders and you can't go where you want to go because there's a limitation because of the capacity. When you have actionable first steps missing, you end up with haphazard efforts and false starts. When you don't have leadership that models the way, you end up with cynicism and distrust. People tend to look at the leaders like they're saying, do as I say, but not as I do. And when you don't have a reinforcement and solidifying the change, then you have a tendency to go back to your old ways. And then if you don't constantly evaluate and improve, then you have a tendency to become skeptical and stagnate and not move to the next level. Powerful organizations also impact policy through advocacy. They follow legislative changes that impact their organization's ability to deliver programs and services. They contact elected officials with comments or concerns about policy. And then, those most powerful organizations don't even wait to follow these changes. They're actually driving the changes at the legislative level. They provide written and oral testimony at public meetings and hearings, and they participate in associations and broad coalitions that provide input into legislation and policies that impact their sectors, and that is pretty much what NABJ is doing right now. So next we want to talk about productive organizations. For our purposes, productive means yielding results, benefits, or profits, and the ability to yield in large amounts. And that again comes from Merriam-Webster. Productive organizations tend to have strategic plans. And as you know, a strategic planning process is one in which an organization takes stock of its mission, vision, and core values to position itself to capitalize on changes in its environment. The end product is a set of strategies to achieve a set of long-term goals and objectives for the organization. And your most productive organizations are going to make sure that not only do they go through the strategic planning process, but that their programs and every process, every administrative process that supports programs and service and administration is in alignment with that strategic plan. The critical questions that are asked during this process: where do we want to go, which sets your strategic direction? And another question is, how do we get there? And those are our strategies and tactics. Productive organizations standardize best practices. They identify and spread their most cost-effective practices throughout the organization. For example, Jumpstart has standardized every aspect of its program and made these practices available in hard copy guidebooks as well as on its intranet. And just so you know, Jumpstart is a nonprofit organization that focuses on youth development and education. Their core members can sign into the system at any time and get lesson plans and curricula. Teach for America, which is another youth-serving organization, and they focus on developing future educational leaders for schools. So they created a centralized information system to capture and share best practices. And this sort of standardization helps them to keep their costs down by increasing efficiency, and staff spends less time reinventing the wheel and more time executing effective practices. Productive organizations invest in staff in critical activities. In fact, they invest more in the activities that are most important to the success of programs and the sustainability of their organizations. For example, Jumpstart invested in building its management capacity, and they noted that when it comes to salaries, paying more over time actually costs less. They found that better compensation reduces turnover, it increases the average experience level of the staff, and builds institutional knowledge. Productive organizations measure their progress along the way. They establish performance measurement systems to give timely feedback about their costs, outputs, and outcomes. And when we talk about outputs, we're talking about production. And when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about what has changed. For example, Year Up has created a set of PowerPoint performance dashboards for reporting regularly on 6 critical areas of their work. So when I speak of dashboards, I'm just talking about a visual where people can see at a glance how an organization is performing. So Year Up has done a dashboard with recruiting and retaining talented staff, cultivating a solid student pipeline, teaching marketable skills, providing high-quality service to corporate partners, positioning students for ongoing success, and creating a sustainable program infrastructure. The management team then sets performance benchmarks and rates its progress against each benchmark. Productive organizations also have outcome evaluation, and during this process, they assess the effectiveness of a program in producing change. The focus is on difficult questions that ask what happened to the program participants and how much of a difference the program made for them. For example, outcome questions for a smoking cessation program might include questions like, did the program succeed in helping people to stop smoking? Was the program more successful with certain groups of people than with others? And what aspects of the program did participants find to have the greatest benefit? On the other hand, a process evaluation allows a nonprofit to look at how it develops its infrastructure and how the infrastructure helps to achieve the desired outcomes. And when we speak of infrastructure, we're talking about organizational structures, management systems, supporting programs like communications and marketing, and even fund development in order to get to the outcomes everyone wants to achieve. The focus of a process evaluation is not necessarily on change to the clients or the environment, is really on the types and quantities of services delivered. So things like the number of people served. It's also focused on the beneficiaries of those services and the resources used to deliver the services, the practical problems encountered, and the ways such problems were resolved. So when we take process evaluation a step further, it can also look at the process of program management and infrastructure together, that is the capacity of an organization to deliver on its promised outcomes. For example, process evaluation questions might include questions like, what specific interventions were put into place by the program in order to fight the problem being tackled? Did the interventions work? Why or why not? And how? What were the kinds of problems encountered in delivering the program? Were there enough resources from the beginning to do it well? Was it well managed? Were staff trained or educated to the right level of the program design? Is there skill at facilitating the program processes from beginning to end? And was there adequate support for the program? So let's look at profitable organizations. When we look at profitable organizations, we want to look at the top indicators of financial health, starting with the income statement. As you are aware, the income statement shows your income, it shows expenses, and the difference between the two is the bottom line, which is your gain or loss or your profit. Profitable organizations have reliable revenues. A profitable organization is able to reliably predict its revenues on a consistent basis from year to year, and the revenue streams are relatively stable. And when we talk about stable streams of income, we're talking about incomes that, we're talking about income levels that are pretty much consistent from year to year. They also have consistent surpluses over the years. And when we talk about surplus, that's more money coming in than going out. And profitable organizations also have enough revenue to cover the full cost of doing business. And this includes the cost of the day-to-day operations, debt service, as well as depreciation. We can also look to the balance sheet for indicators of financial health. As you know, your balance sheet has assets, it has liabilities, and it also has the equity of an organization. Assets minus liabilities equals equity. So profitable organizations have strong asset coverage. Ideally, the ratio of assets to liabilities is about 2 to 1. So that means for every dollar that the organization owes, there are about $2 in assets to cover it. As the asset coverage approaches 1 to 1, or that means as the amount of assets begins to equal the amount of liabilities, that means the ability for organizations to provide quality services is compromised because money that would be used for programs must now go to repay debt. Generally speaking, nonprofits should have enough unrestricted cash to cover at least 3 months of expenses. The Nonprofit Finance Fund 2015 State of the Sector study, they found that 53% of America's nonprofits had 3 months or less cash on hand. So that means if they don't get another dollar coming in, many organizations, unless they have a line of credit or unless they have emergency fundraisers or some other money coming in, they could actually close their doors within 3 months or less. The traditional definition of profitable tells us that a profitable organization is one that has money left over after all the obligations for the accounting period have been paid. Total revenue less total expenses equals profit. However, there's a new way to calculate profitability, and that's the triple bottom line. John Elkington, an expert on corporate responsibility, strove to measure sustainability through the mid-1990s by encompassing a new framework to measure performance in corporate America. This accounting framework, called the triple bottom line, or TBL, went beyond the traditional measures of profits, return on investment, and shareholder value to include things like the environmental and social dimensions. By focusing on comprehensive investment results, that is, with respect to performance along interrelated dimensions of profits, people, and planet, the triple bottom line reporting can be an important tool to support sustainability goals. Interest in triple bottom line accounting has been growing across the for-profit, nonprofit, and government sectors over the years. Many businesses and nonprofit organizations have adopted the TBL sustainability framework to evaluate their performance, and a similar approach has gained currency with governments at the federal, state, and local levels. However, there are challenges to putting the TBL into practice. Some of these challenges include measuring each of the three categories, finding applicable data that you can use from sector to sector, and calculating a project or policy's contribution to sustainability. These challenges aside, the TBL framework allows organizations to evaluate the ramifications of their decisions from a truly long-run perspective. So this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to call me at 773-571-3886. You can email me at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. You can also visit valeriefleonard.com or follow me on Twitter @valeriefleonard.com. Thank you very much.